Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DeAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movements. I run a year-long women's circle online every year called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year. I do public speaking, I work with clients one-on-one, and I also do stand-up comedy now. This is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators, to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's background experiences and truths, and they learn to trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we really do need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DeAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs to hear it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear here and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen from. Thank you so much for being here with me, and now let's get into the show. This is episode number 302 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DeAlto, and today's guest is Christina Dunbar. Christina is another multi-passionate and talented artist and creative, and I loved her big truth because it was all about not just being one thing. I have a feeling a lot of you will be able to relate to this. She talked about being all of the things: sexual, spiritual, smart, shy, bold, tender, fierce, and more. Some of the things even contradict each other sometimes. We got into the creative impulse and her journey from the world of ballet and being really shy growing up to becoming an exotic dancer to support herself when she moved to Los Angeles, and also finding her voice. We talked a lot about storytelling as a beautiful machine that creates empathy and compassion, and we also discussed creative process and inspiration. We got into what brings our senses alive and how witnessing other people's art can be really healing, just as much so, if not more, than sharing ourselves creatively. I really loved this chat. The show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/302. Listen, share, find me on Instagram, let me know what you think. And as a reminder, the 2 ways to work with me one-on-one, if you're interested in doing that, are up on the website over at wildsoulmovement.com. There's a drop down under the Work With Me tab, and you can check out my one-on-one immersions. You could book an Akashic Records reading. I have space in my schedule for those in April and May, and we'll be updating June and July as those come closer. And as well, I have spots available for immersions through October of this year. So if you're interested in either of those things, I mention them every single week. And I know some of you are sitting there going, oh, I have to check that out. And then you forget. Maybe let this week be the week you remember. Either way, I'm super excited for this episode with Christina Dunbar, and let's get into it. Hello, everybody. For people who like to watch the podcast, you'll notice a different setting today. My Wi-Fi went down, and I'm at a friend's house who was lovely enough to rescue me during podcast batching day. So if you're like, what's with the American flag and pictures of somebody else's family? We're just rolling with the punches over here. As well, the other caveat I'll give is I'm on like the tail end of a cold, so my voice is weird, and we're just going to roll with that too. So Christina Dunbar is with us today, who's another amazing friend. So I know she doesn't care. Thank you so much, Christina.
I do not care. You sound sexy. I like it.
I know. I call it my ass voice, but people are like, you should call it your sexy phone operator voice. I'm like, whatever. So I'm so excited you're here. We have, there's two questions I always start the interview with. And the first one, to just always be reminding folks to pay attention to their bodies and foster that connection is, how are you feeling in your body today? What's going on over there?
I love that. Well, I just did a really good movement, like a 15-minute movement practice, which is so good. Anytime I want to speak or connect with someone or get on stage or get on a podcast, I'm like, oh, I remember you, body. You're here.
You're here.
You're here. So I'm in my body right now. I'm feeling good. Feeling some excitement, some butterflies. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Amazing. And then what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
So this is something that I have been really tuning into for a while now, but I have to keep coming back to that. And it's a simple truth, but not easy for me to settle into. And that is the idea that I am not one thing. I'm not one thing as a woman walking this earth. I am sexual and spiritual and smart. I can be shy and bold. I could be tender and fierce. And this is something that has taken me a while to really step into, and we can talk about this later. It was really helpful for me when I was in my dancing phase and felt a lot of shame and self-hate, really, and confusion around my sexuality. So just like tapping into that truth around my body and my sexuality was so helpful. And it also applies to my creative life. And it's something I keep coming back to in my creative life because it can block me sometimes. The idea that I have to be in one box. And just to give some context, I came to Hollywood from Seattle, Washington when I was 19 years old, and I wanted to pursue acting, and I was so attached to the label actress, like a death grip on that label. And I found in my creative journey that I had all these other loves. I was a multi-passionate artist, and I loved poetry, and I loved spoken word, and I loved playing silly, weird, wild characters on the stage. And I loved writing. I loved writing scripts, and I loved writing plays. And that really actually kept me frozen for a long time because I was like, which one do I have to choose? I have to be one thing. And the real truth around that was I have to choose the right path to get me to XYZ level of success. And it wasn't even really at that time, my definition of success. It was sort of this general idea of success that society had for artists. So I was like, which is the right path? And of course, when you're thinking there's only one right path, there's no room to play. There's no room for exploration. There's no room to just try stuff out and see what sticks or see where you want to adjust. And so for me, for a long time, I was like creatively frozen. And it wasn't until I started to play with the idea that I am not one thing and sort of toggle with this idea that I'm a storyteller. Like that word really felt good in my body because I was like, oh, if I'm a storyteller, I don't have to choose between spoken word artist or writer or funny person or a producer and director of other women's stories. I could be all of that under the umbrella of storyteller. So I started to play with the idea of I'm a storyteller. I'm not one thing. I don't have to choose. And it's up for me right now too. Like just last week, I was writing a new show and it had a more of a funny slant. So I'm like, okay, this new show, now do I have to be more of a comedic storyteller? And it's like, no, why put myself in the box? So yeah, this is something I'm constantly playing with and coming back to.
I love this so much. And I'm so happy that this is where the conversation is starting because, you know, all my years of working with people in different capacities, I just am constantly in awe of and aware of how differently we're all built. And I know there are books, I think there's a book called like Do the One Thing or like, and I know there's a book called Essentialism and where a lot of the emphasis is on like pick one thing. Yeah. And I think wholeheartedly that some people are built to thrive that way.
Yes.
And a lot of people aren't. And I really relate to you. I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the divine timing. Last night, I was actually rewriting. I haven't had an actual work with me page on my website for a pretty long time, but I'm writing it out, and it's like a friend of mine, Hillary Weiss, she's a copywriter, posted this once on Facebook. Do you watch Game of Thrones?
Yes.
So she was like, you know, me and a lot of my friends are like Daenerys Targaryen. Like when you ask us what we are, what we do. You know, it's like Mother of Dragons, from here, from there, from that, Khaleesi, this, that, you know, it's
totally.
like we're all this way. It's like, well, I'm a stand-up comedian and I do healing work. Hi, Dakota. My friend's baby is on the screen, is on the window over there. He's so cute.
Oh.
And it's like, and I do Akashic Records readings now, and I run these online programs, and I host a podcast, and I'm a truth. It's like, how much time do you have?
Yeah. And what's cool is right now in the collective, I think we're seeing more examples of that.
Yeah.
For me, years ago, I really wasn't seeing a lot of examples of that. It really was more of the idea of jack of all trades, master of none,
Yes.
and follow the one thing. And like you said, some people are really built for that. And I'm all for like focus and grounding into something. But for me, it was about how can I focus while encompassing
Yes.
all of the
Yes.
gifts that I have,
Yes.
and really listen. I know you're a big body person, so listen to my body and my gut versus just the mind. Like I felt
Yeah.
like my mind had hijacked my heart for quite some time because I was only in strategy mode of how do I get to this one place. And I really wasn't honoring what I call my dharma, my sacred duty, what I'm here to do. It's like, if I have all these loves placed into this body and these gifts and these visions, what if they're here for an actual purpose? What if
Yeah.
they're given to me because I can follow through on them? And this is just my artist DNA. It's my makeup, that I am sort of a hybrid.
Yeah. And again, like, I just love that because it's so permission giving, but also now that I've begun to express myself more, which those of you listening or watching, I've known Christina and known of Christina for many years, but I didn't actually get deep into her world until this last year when I did her program, which is called Red, which is based in Los Angeles. She'll tell us about it in a little while. But as I started doing stand-up comedy last year, one of the things I was having to like reconcile within, just like Christina's talking about here, is like being a performer or being an entertainer, which actually ended up being the thing that resonates more for me than performer. Even like being an artist, and like my work is my art. Like there were all these things that I was just like trying on as identities and being like, I don't know if that fits. But seeing how they all interact with each other and they feed and fuel each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if I shut down one, then it actually is dulling all the rest of them.
Yeah. And just the creative impulse. There's something to be said about following through on the creative impulse without letting too much of the mind stuff and the identity stuff get in the way before we give ourselves the chance to just have that experience and see how it feels in our body. Yeah. For me, I'm such a heady person. I've gotten a lot more into my body since I really started to commit to my artist, because it's all about body and voice for me now. But I was such a heady perfectionist, and I came from this ballet world, which was all about discipline and the idea that things had to be in ballet, everything needs to be perfect, right? And so like the idea of just trying something out and being messy was so scary to my perfectionist.
Right.
And it wasn't until I allowed myself to just try stuff out and go like, okay, well, I love spoken word, but maybe it fits into my life this way. Maybe it's not going to be a huge piece, right? Like just seeing how things actually feel and adjusting and pivoting from there. It's a lot more freeing. It gives you permission to play. And it gives you permission to actually feel in your body what is right versus asking your head an idea of what could possibly be the right life for you. I just think playing is so important and exploration is so important.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So would you say that by nature, like, was that perfectionism natural for you and you just happened to be in a ballet world that really drilled it in? Or is that actually not your nature, but the ballet world? made you that way. Does that make sense?
I think it was a dominant trait. I was the older sibling. I know they've done studies on this. I was the more responsible one. I was the one that studied all the time. So I think that was in me. And I still had these latent traits of spontaneity and artistry that just came from the gut and the body and just trying stuff out. But yeah, I think ballet really did emphasize the perfectionist in me.
Yeah.
So I started ballet when I was 3.5.
Right. And at that point, like, it's kind of hard to separate like nature from nurture, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would love for you to tell us about your one woman show, because to me, and bravery is an interesting concept, because what is brave to one person is not to another, because it's really only brave if it requires like an exorbitant amount of like courage for you. You know what I mean? And so like that shifts over time. But to me, the idea of creating and performing and touring with a one woman show is literally one of like the bravest, most vulnerable things I could possibly imagine. And that's one of the things that you do.
Yeah, and it was terrifying for me. I am not, to speak about nature versus nurture, I came into the world very shy and sensitive and a really just tender artistic soul where I could feel other people and I had a lot of empathy. And I was so shy in first grade that my teacher said to my parents, I'm really worried about this girl. Like, she's not talking in class at all. Like, is she okay? Is she like, yeah, it's just really worried about me. And I grew up just feeling like I was a good girl, a perfectionist, was terrified of being seen and heard, was terrified of using my voice. And yet I had this call or this pull to explore being on stage. It's so weird when you feel like your mission is something that you're absolutely terrified of. And I think many of the women that I work with can relate to that. But I felt like I was supposed to be telling my stories and being on stage. So when I got the idea to write Dirty Me Divine, I was absolutely just scared shitless of like what people would think. And could I actually hold a stage for 75 minutes? Who was I to be on stage for 75 minutes? I barely had started acting. I hadn't done a lot of really strong acting work, but I also felt a call to tell my story. And my show is, can I tell you a little bit about the show? Because that'll give a lot more context.
Yes.
The show is my story, and it takes the audience on a ride from when I was a ballerina. I grew boobs basically overnight when I was like 17 years old. I got these double D breasts, which were not allowed in the ballet world. And it's like overnight, my dreams were shattered. The thing that I was devoted to for most of my life at that point was gone. And I hated my body. I hated my breasts. I felt like I was getting all this attention from men, and my dreams were gone. And I was sort of in a state of depression. And I decided a couple of years later to move to Hollywood to see if I could possibly pursue acting. Because I was like, okay, maybe one artistic path won't work, but I do have this love of expression, so let me try the acting thing. And I got to Hollywood, and I basically ran out of money. And I started to burlesque and go-go dance, which I loved, because like burlesque dancing, you get to shake your body and people are applauding for that. And I was like, okay, I like this, but it's not paying the bills. And people in the burlesque world were like, oh, why don't you start stripping? So I became an exotic dancer. And so Dirty Me Divine is my story of going from ballet to burlesque to stripping. And it's deeper than that. It's about a good girl that sort of gets into this dark, shadowy world, and how that both empowered me as a woman, helped me find my voice, helped me connect to my sexuality, helped me connect to my power, but also was very disempowering in many ways. There's so many layers to that life. And so the story is about that journey and how I am not one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm super curious. And again, just I love this idea of like holding multiple things. even in my work, I talk about this a lot in terms of emotions or even with self-love. Like sometimes when people are talking about self-love, they're like, well, you wouldn't attract that if you loved yourself. And it's like, no, like you can love yourself and sometimes shitty things happen, like,
Thank you. Yes.
like the
Yes.
same way as when we love other people, sometimes we're angry with them or like don't want to see their face for a week, like we have to have space for things to coexist. So I'm so happy at all the different ways this is coming up in this conversation and really giving people examples. So I'd love to hear a little more specifically about the coexistence of like even the being a stripper, being an exotic dancer, how it was empowering and disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just to remind people listening, like Christina doesn't speak on behalf of all strippers or exotic dancers. This is just her experience.
Really not. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Empowering for me. Well, I'll tell you, my first experience with a strip club was at a place in Hollywood called Crazy Girls, which I loved. It was sort of a legendary place. I later ended up dancing in Vegas, which was a whole new like ball of wax. But this place in Hollywood, the women would come on stage, all different shapes, all different sizes, and they would ooze their essence, their type of sensuality. And they would move in a way that to me was so alluring and so magnetic. And because like the first time I went into the club, I was just watching and I was mesmerized. I was like, that's beautiful. Mm. And so I started in that club and I started to find sort of my sexual beast, the way I would move in my body when I felt sensual and sexual. And it felt like I was just honoring my body again. Because again, coming from that strict ballet world where for a time I was barely eating and, growing those boobs that I hated, coming into my body and learning how to move and sort of finding the animal, the creature that moves in a way that feels good to me. It wasn't so much about pleasing the audience. It was about what felt good to me. And when I did that, the audience would respond. But it was really about what felt good in my body. So that was amazing. Making money, making cash, I'm not going to lie. I loved making the cash. I loved counting all the money. I loved the dollar bills. Like that was cool for me. I was not making money for a while in LA and I knew that life. And so to come home and have this cash, I was like, yes, that felt good. What felt disempowering was when I went to Vegas and it was just a lot darker, a lot dirtier. I didn't feel like I had a real strong connection to what I felt was consenting, like what my voice would say no to and my boundaries. It took me a while to really work through that because it was a tricky thing. It's like, I want to receive this money from you and this adoration, but also there's things that I don't want you to do. So it's playing a game. How do I play that game?
Yeah.
And so things happened to me in that world. I left because I had an evening where I was assaulted. It was not good. And so there was some stuff that felt very shameful. And also at the end of that time, I'm so glad you're talking about what you were saying earlier in terms of making room for everything. I was really into personal growth at the end of that journey, meaning the end of my dance career and about to leave. And I was in the space of, okay, I'm not going to be a victim. This is my life. And if this is my life, why am I creating this? And so I got into this loop of like, I hated dancing. I remember being on the plane one day and just looking out the window on the way to Vegas and like, I just want this plane to go down. I don't want to get there. I don't want to go there. And then I'm like blaming myself for feeling this way because I'm like, well, if I hate it so much, why am I still here? But the truth was I felt stuck. I really didn't see a way out. I wasn't doing a lot of things in my artistic life. I wasn't finding confidence in who I was just as a person outside of dance. It was really sheltering me in a lot of ways from trying other things out. And so it became this self-destructive loop of like, if I'm not a victim and I have the power, why am I here? And I did that for years, Elizabeth, like that kind of loop. Yeah.
So I'm so curious about some of the like nitty gritty details of some of the like transition points in this story. So I'm going to ask if there's anything you don't feel like sharing, please feel free to be like, I don't feel like sharing that. But what was it like to be someone, so you didn't have exotic dancing experience. Like, how did you even get your first job? What was that like? Like going into interview, like what was the training like?
There's no training. I was 21 and you walk in, I think you do a dance on stage. Oh my God, I was totally the odd girl out. I remember everybody was wearing like these really sexy, like little short shorts and bras. And I wore this long burlesque skirt with a slit and these heels that sort of had clogs on the bottom. And did more of a burlesque dance because that's the world that I was coming from. But they hired me and it was really just like you get thrown into this world. And again, I would watch how the other women were moving and I'd be like, oh, I like that. I don't like that. And a lot of it honestly did come naturally because I was in that container where that kind of movement and expression was allowed and not only allowed, but called for.
Right.
I was like, oh, this is actually in me. I'm just going to go for it. And do this thing. In terms of on-the-job training, like how to make money.
Like even that, like talking to people or solicit, like this is blowing my mind. Keep going.
Well, I'll say that I found a persona. Persona, which was the cute, sweet, sort of dumb, playful chick that could seduce you into wanting to play with me. And it was really great in terms of sales because you get a lot of no's, especially in Vegas. It is so busy and there are so many customers and there's so many girls working at night, like hundreds of girls working in one night. And so you really get used to the no. And how do I reset from, oh my God, it's 2 a.m. and I still haven't made any money. How do I reset from feeling like crap to, okay, let me come into this inviting, cute, sexy space again and go and move on to this next customer and try again with him. But I just learned by doing it over and over again.
All right. So here's something else I'm really curious about. Where I used to live, I had a friend who was a stripper. And I remember her, one of the things I appreciated about her so much, she was also polyamorous. And this is another thing that I think some people are just like built for, whereas other people would just like not thrive in that environment. Something I really admired about this person was literally her ability to like fall in love with anyone. Like your Virgo Capricorn friend over here is just not like that. You know? And for periods in my life, I would feel like bad, like something was wrong with me. Why can't I be more open like these other people? But it's like, no, that's just literally not how I'm built. So again, in honoring how people are built, I guess I'm going to ask this question with 2 prongs. One, again, what's like your natural inclination towards like being open to more people in that way? But also, what was your discernment around like if you were actually like repulsed by someone or just like couldn't vibe but still needed to like do the work and make the money, like how do you reconcile all of that and work with that? Because I'm sure you were faced with it thousands of times.
All the time. I will say that I am pretty open to people and I love playing in different circles. I think because I'm an artist, so I've been in like the artist circle and I'm a dancer and I've been in the dancer circle and I like personal growth. So I'm in the spiritual development circle. So I can vibe with different archetypes.
Yeah. And
so I think there's something to be said for that. But as far as the men that were disgusting, I'll be honest, it really was how I was feeling that night. Like some nights I was like, okay, this is my line. This is my boundary tonight. This is where I'm not going to go. And some nights I was like, F it. This is happening.
Yeah.
This person, I'm not loving him. And also I got better towards the end of like, okay, if somebody's touching me in a way that I don't like and I'm just so over it, I would put their hands behind their back and just hold them down, but still be really like sexy while I was doing it and find ways to sort of play, not just be like, I hate you, get out of my face.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it just depended on the night and my mood.
Yeah.
That's the real answer.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'm also wondering, from like the way that I want to word this might not be the best way to word it, but because I'm so fascinating with all kinds of healing modalities and like time and place, and I really thoroughly believe like if someone's in front of you, you can help them. Did you ever have any, like, I want to call it like from the priestess perspective,
Yeah.
any experiences that you were just like, wow, this was so healing, either for this person or for me or for both of us?
Yes, I did. And it's so weird to have. Like, I remember one was at 5 in the morning. Because you work, I mean, I would work till 6 or 7 in the morning, and it's just like a weird time. And there's people on drugs and ecstasy and coke, and it's just like it's just a weird vibe. But I was dancing for this one guy, and I don't know, I could just tell. He said he didn't come to clubs like that a lot or all the time, and most of the times I'm like, yeah, right. But this time I could tell he wanted real connection, and this would happen quite a few times. I remember him specifically where we just zoned in, and it was sensual and it was beautiful, but time sort of stopped, and it just felt like he was respectful of me as a whole person, even though I'm half naked dancing in front of him, and I got to see inside him. And oh yeah, it just give me goosebumps right now because it was a real moment. The persona was taken off, and with all the loud music around us and all of the craziness around us, it was just a moment human to human. And that felt really good for me. It was healing for me because I'd had that experience a few times, but not many. And anytime I did have that, it just made me feel like, again, I'm not one thing. Oh, you get to see all of me. And cool, I can see all of you. And we can be in this interaction and this exchange, and it doesn't have to get gross, right? Like it could be beautiful. It could be sacred. When you talk about the priestess, that's what I would feel. There were moments where I was like, I feel like a goddess. I feel like you're worshiping me. And that's an exhilarating feeling.
Thank you for indulging all of my questions because, you know, this is something else over the last several years, especially as I've been really looking at all of my own unconscious biases and having so many conversations with people on the show about that. It's so cool to actually want to hear about the things that fall outside of what my old biases would have been before, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people have like stereotypes and judgments about like strippers and the kind of people they are and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But I love geeking out on what are the beautiful healing moments, even in the things that we might think where it wouldn't be, you know?
Yes, totally. And that's why I love my show. And then my show also turned into a scripted series that I started writing with Lisa Stedman, really showcasing different women in the strip club and telling their stories. And we did a live show, and it was so beautiful to hear from the audience, especially from the men that were like, and the women, but this feeling of like, oh, you're a human. That's what stories do. Stories are these beautiful machines that can create empathy and communion and compassion when done right. When we get vulnerable, when we speak of the truth, that's what good stories do. And that was part of what I wanted to tell my story, because I felt so much judgment from society around being a stripper. And I took a lot of that on as my own. And so I wanted to write a show, and I wanted to tell my stories so that I could break through some of the myths. And also, like, some of the stuff is true. There's stereotypical stuff that goes on. Yes. And who are some of the women that go into these places and why?
Yeah. Thank you. So I want to talk more about what happens in Red, because I mean, the thing that I appreciated about it so much, I didn't realize how much embodiment work there would be. And I loved that, and how much like sacredness and intention, again, just because I was like unfamiliar with the process of performance or artistry. And one of the things that I also loved so much was that everyone was different. Like, people had different, there were some singer-songwriters. There were some people who I still don't even know what their art was. You know, like, they would just get up and do something and I'd be like, I don't know what that was, but I'm like crying, and it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Performance art, where you just kind of use what's real for you in the moment and share it however it wants to come through.
Yes, and even at the final performance night where I'm forgetting her name, I think it might have been Wendy, had written a song about a former lover of hers who'd committed
Mhm.
suicide. And it was actually the opening act of the night. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to bounce back from this and do stand-up comedy in like 20 minutes.
Which you did. And you were electric.
Thank
and
you.
It was so much fun to watch you. Yeah.
And even that, we could talk about that in a little while, but it was just really, again, just opened my eyes to like just things that I hadn't spent time around before, which was so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I love Red is that we do sort of this, it's like a cross-training approach to artistry, meaning I do ask women to do different things that they may not be used to doing. Like maybe you're in the lane of poetry, but I ask you to do improv. Or maybe you're in the lane of singing, but I ask you to get into your body. There have been former Reds where I asked the participants to bring in a genre of art that they had never done before. And this just, again, it just gets us out of that box of what we think we can do because we've never tried anything else. It allows us to be messy and imperfect. And then also get information like, oh, okay, this actually opens something up for me in the genre that I am interested in. Yeah. And so just seeing all the women from different forms of expression, it's beautiful, it's inspiring, it's igniting. And I think it really helps to make an artist more whole to be around all of that. Again, just getting out of our people we're used to playing with and seeing what else is out there.
So I don't know if I ever told you this, but during Red, I don't think I would have said yes to this or signed up for it if I wasn't in Red and kind of steeped in this practice of exploring artistry. I was on, I think I saw it on Instagram. Oh no, a friend of mine sent it to me. Cynthia sent it to me. There was a writing workshop here in Venice Beach with a man who'd been one of the staff writers for Seinfeld. His last name was Melman. I'm blanking on his first name at the moment. But when I went, what was so fascinating is they had covered the tables with paper, with like brown paper, and there were colored pencils everywhere because one of his things was doodling.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And he was saying how in the writing room in Seinfeld, he would often get, quote, air quotes, in trouble for doodling. But he's like, what they didn't realize was that doodling helped me focus. He's like, I was probably listening better and retaining better than anyone else in that room. But doodling is what helped me like zone in. And I was like, oh my God, all throughout school, I was constantly doodling in my margins. If you ever looked at it. So they encouraged us, like they invited us to doodle. And I started Googling all these little like doodles of ... like whatever. And just like drawing all these things, rocket ships, basketballs, planets, flowers, butterflies, dolphins. And I'm like, oh my God. So that it brought back a thing that I had never even realized was a thing. And now where I go to stuff, lectures or whatever, or workshops, like I give myself permission to doodle regardless of what other people are thinking, because it almost like puts me in this Zen receptive place.
Totally. Oh, I can so see that. Yeah, because it opens up the creative mind, the right brain. So you're moving from, especially as a writer, even though it's creative, it's still logical because you're using words, right? Yep. So more connected maybe to the left brain. And so I could see how doodling opens up the creative side of the brain. Yeah.
And also though, like if you're doodling, you're not thinking.
Exactly. Yes. Who was it? I think it was Martha Beck. I was watching her talk about these studies done where people lose a part of the functioning of the brain and it actually opens up more creativity for them. So there's something to be said about how the brain can possibly cramp the creative flow.
Right. Well, and I think this is also, I'm curious when you write things, because writing is part of performance in what you do. What needs to be the environment for you to write? Do you listen to music? What kind of music? Stuff like that. I'm always so curious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I get the best ideas at the gym when I'm listening to hardcore hip hop and I'm like, I feel the beat and things are happening and I'll just imagine myself on a stage. And of course it's like the best thing ever. I'm like imagining these amazing performance and it's so vague actually really what I'm performing, but I'll just get into that space of yes, me on stage taking the spotlight. And then it's like, okay, well, what is this music actually bringing up inside of me? And I'll get these phrases or ideas that start to come out and then I'll put them in my phone notebook and go from there. So that's one way. So many things inspire me. When I follow these dancers on Instagram, and it is the best thing ever. When I just watch somebody be really free in their expression, something about that absolutely lights me up and makes me want to go put in the time. Sometimes it isn't that I'm at the gym, but I'm just sitting at my computer and I have a seed of an idea and I don't know where to start, but maybe I'll just have 5 minutes of like vomit writing where just wherever anything comes through. And it's not always fun to do that. So seeing other people in their art definitely inspires me to like go and be with my art. And it's gotten more disciplined. If I'm writing a show and I know something is coming up, I will put it in my calendar that I sit at the computer and just write and see what comes through.
I went for the first time last week, since I've been in LA for a couple of years now. I went to the Getty, to the museum.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And of course, it was so funny. I ended up in the garden.
Yes.
the most sensual part of the place, where like the water is running and all the colors of flowers and like the sun. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is going to be one of my new. I'm also really fascinated by this as well for different people. And I hope people listening who are or maybe don't fancy themselves creative are having some inspiration to at least be open to it. And the people who know they are creatives, I would actually love to hear from you all. You know how I roll. Find me in the Instagram DMs and let me know your processes and things like this. Like, what is your creative fuel? Like, I felt so inspired and energized is really the word after going to a place like the Getty that's so expansive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that brings all your senses alive. I think I'm similar in that way where first of all, I love nature. I'm with you. Like if my feet are in the grass or I'm in the mud or I'm in the woods, that is super energizing. And I think you touched on a really important point in terms of, we're all living busy lives, but how can we make ourselves more energized to make time and space for the things we want, even if we have a list of to-dos that we have to get done, right? And so some of that is like getting energized. So going to nature, or for me, I like all the senses. So essential oils and a candle and like my furry little, my texture around me. So that's helpful for me as well to tap into that more creative place and to go into the unknown, because that's what we do as creatives. We go into the unknown place. And if our mind is just focused on like the to-do list, or I'm so tired that I don't have the energy, it's harder to get into that mysterious flow.
I was talking to someone recently, and time is a constant issue for people living in the modern world, right?
Yeah.
But what we were realizing is that there's literally so much that we take for granted as part of our day-to-day that could actually be cut. And I know not everyone has iPhones, but I have an iPhone, and the most recent update also, it comes with this like screen time. You get this like update every week. Yeah. It's like your screen time increased, your screen time decreased, and it literally tells you how many hours a day. Do you get this?
Well, I do it on Instagram. I have my timer of like, okay, it's been your 30 minutes, you're done.
It's alarming.
Yeah.
It's like your screen time is down 15% from last week for an average of 3 hours and 45 minutes. And I'm like, what the balls was I doing?
Yes.
On an average of 3 hours and 41. And granted, I do a lot of my stuff in Facebook groups and whatever, so some of it is actual work. But I just want to remind people that like we have time.
We totally have time. And in terms of the creative life, you can take your phone, and I do this, put on the recorder if I have an idea in the car. Because here's the thing, if I have an idea and I don't put it in a container somewhere, either on the page or in my phone recorder, it'll slip away. And that happens to me quite a bit. And so it's ideas that I can capture somehow. So I could be in the car driving and just put it into the microphone and record it. Yeah. And that's super helpful. So just, I guess, also stealing moments too, because there's something to be said for that, as well as I love to create a sacred container around my art and have that time. And for people that are just really busy or just getting started, there's ways to steal moments and be able to do your art in between the days. I mean, who was it? J.K. Rowling, that's her name, right? Who does
Harry Potter?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, she would write on the bus on her way to work, 30 minutes. There's time. We can find time.
Yeah, and I love that stealing moments, because yes, everyone, although we have time, everyone's availability is quite different based on a variety of factors. So we're not out here being like, you have so much time, everybody. Like, that might not be the case, but I'm saying any even little portion, even down to the stealing moments. Because I think sometimes we convince ourselves it's like the all or nothing mentality of like, well, if I don't have a day, or if I don't have a whole afternoon or whatever, it's not even worth it. But like, it really is.
It's so worth it. And in fact, I think I was in that dangerous thinking of all or nothing. And it really came up in terms of my show, right? Because it felt like such a big piece to bite. And writing the show, and it became about the whole show. And then how do I produce it? And all these moving parts. And that was so detrimental to the pace. And it's like baby steps. If we can baby step into the bigger vision and give ourselves permission to do that, it is so helpful. So helpful.
What I love about this as well is like the healing aspect of all of it. I'm sure there are studies. I should like look up what is the science behind this. You might know. You might not though. No pressure. There's just something so healing about creative expression. Whether you're telling a story or not, to be able to just get parts of yourself out of yourself, right? Like,
yes.
And like the awe and the beauty, like I'm sure everyone listening can relate at some point in your life to seeing something, whether it was art or nature or whatever, that was just so beautiful. You just like cried, or you had such goosebumps, or you were so moved emotionally, and it's like inexplicable.
Yeah.
And you know, I do believe in God. I know some people don't, and that's cool, or call it something else. But to me, those are those moments where I'm like, sometimes I'll even yell out like a total weirdo. I'll be like, God is real.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Because like, how could it not be? Like, you can't tell me that like man's hand is the only thing happening in this, you know?
Yes. It's like divine intervention, especially when we're doing the improv thing and we don't have everything figured out as artists. But there have been studies on it. I don't know all the facts, but I can look this up for you because I have a book around it.
Oh, cool.
Basically, one of the studies that I was reading about was this writing your story. And they were doing a study on a bunch of people that have been through certain kinds of trauma and how writing the story, people that had written their story out had a certain amount of closure to it and completion. But then people who wrote their story and shared it verbally had even more of a sense of like completion and healing. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is the work that I was starting to do years ago, because I had a program called She Takes the Stage, where I had women come, and it wasn't meant to be necessarily about trauma, but somehow when I asked women to write vulnerable and personal stories, a lot came out, mostly around sexuality and spirituality. Those were like the themes that seemed to pop up just organically. And a lot of women found that in writing their story and then sharing it in a place that felt safe and sacred, even though it was for a live audience, I think I did a good job of making it feel like this is a container where you can share. And so a lot of women had closure around things that they had been holding on to. So I don't know the facts around this, but I do know there have been studies. There's something about writing and sharing that is so healing.
And I think that asterisk on in a safe container, right?
Yeah. I mean, Brene Brown talks about that. She says your stories aren't for everyone's ears. And so I know for me, even sharing my stripper stuff, it was like I started off by telling a couple friends that didn't know, and it started in a small circle. And then I started blogging about it. And then I just sort of lost some of the charge. I remember one time after I'd done my show, somebody went on my Facebook page and was saying, you're a whore, you're a this, you're a that, and just all of these, just really attacking me. And I was like, oh, I feel nothing. Like absolutely nothing. Because again, I had taken those baby steps where I was telling people that I trusted that could reflect back to me, you're not horrible, you're not crazy, you're not this, like I see all of you. And so I'd created a lot of healing already. So to go out in a bigger circle and to share with strangers felt okay to me at that point.
I mean, this is such an amazing point, whether it's in the context of art or sharing your story in any way.
Yes.
Because we see this online a lot. Like, you just don't know when something might go viral, right? Like when someone might decide to share something and you're like all of a sudden having all these eyes on a thing that was like really just meant for like you and your people.
Totally. Yeah. And to really to really honor your life stories as sacred. And because the idea of authenticity is really big right now. And I'm also really into vulnerability, and especially in storytelling. And we have to be the protectors of our stories and know when it's okay for us inside to go further and to share with a larger audience.
So I was on a date last week, and this guy asked me, he's like, so what's something nobody in the world knows about you? And I looked at him and I went, why on earth would I share something like that with a person that I've known for 30 minutes?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, like, he got like weird and defensive. And I was like, he's like, well, who am I going to tell? And I'm like, it's not about you telling anyone. I don't know you. I don't know if you're a narcissist. I don't know if you might use this against me. Like, there's so many things. I'm like, I've dealt with way too many types of humans in my life. Why would I disrespect myself in such a way to share? He's like, well, it doesn't have to be serious. It could be like, I'm like, you're digging yourself in a hole here, bro. Let's skip it, you know? But we live in like such a shock culture.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And that's not dangerous. Art. That's not art.
No. It's not art. And I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous to our psyche when we go there and we're not ready for it.
Yeah. Like, it's okay to take our time and create a safe environment. I love your emphasis on container. And actually, I feel like we've had this conversation on the show before, but just in case anyone listening is going, what do they mean by container? How would you describe that for people?
Well, for me, a container in terms of art is, for me, it's beginning, middle, and end. I usually run programs. I have a beginning, middle, and end. It's setting up agreements with the women in the group. I typically ask the women in the group. One piece is really around sacred witnessing and not objectifying. Side note, I was just listening to Jill Soloway, the director of Transparent, talk about the female lens as a director, to seeing women in the camera lens through a female perspective. And it was so beautiful. And it was really about not objectifying the woman, but seeing her as a subject. Oh, so I get goosebumps talking about it. This is a total. I'm trailblazing off of your question.
Take your tangent. We love it.
My tangent. But that's something that was an agreement in Red that I think everybody does so beautifully. We really witness one another instead of seeing each other and what's wrong in that person or judging or objectifying. We really try to come back to the body and just feel and be with that woman. So a container has agreements, has a beginning, middle, and end. I also believe someone is watching over the process. There's a leader, a facilitator that you can come to if you have, if something comes up, so you can talk through it, versus being on Facebook and something comes up and you're just like, I'm feeling all this right now and I don't know what to do with it. You don't know who to go to. You don't know who is safe to go to. Somebody that you can trust. And so those are some of my ideas about that. What are yours?
That. I think I love to think of it in terms of alchemy, which is that a container is just like a crucial part of any type of real transformation or transmutation. So like you need the thing, right, that you want to transmute or transform. You need the energy to catalyze the transformation or transmutation, and you need the container in which to do that. You're not doing it like out in the open. Like there needs to be a container to hold that process.
That's right. Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So good.
But this is something I loved about Red, actually. I remember being so exhausted after the first one because that sacred witnessing, I remember being like, oh, this is so great. And something that also just landed for me about it, which I don't remember if this was intentionally stated or not, was to also witness someone and like what you just said, make them a subject. And it's just like entirely about witnessing them, not being in your own head about how it's making you feel about yourself or your own stuff or comparing, but just like really being there like for that person, that like witness, like there's a difference between like watching something and like witnessing it.
Totally. And I feel like particularly for perfectionists, this is a good practice because I'll tell a story. I had a woman who was in the audience who came not to this Red show, but the last Red show. And she was like, I was watching and I was like, but this isn't perfect. She was totally in her perfectionist. And she goes, why am I saying that? And she had a moment, an alchemy in watching. She had a moment where she was like, oh, I am so harsh and critical of my own artist, but this is what I put onto other artists when I watch them. And how can I not do that? And she said, when I was able to let go of that place in my mind that was judging, and just be, and she was like, it was so beautiful. I was able to see all these things.
Yeah.
And then she was like, how can I work with this in my own art? Because that's who I am in my own art. I'm so judgy and so critical and so harsh. And there's a line between that. I know when I'm in my harsh, critical place where it's like an old man that's pointing a finger at me. This is what it feels like in my head.
Yeah.
An old man telling me how I am wrong in every way versus the nuanced way of, yeah, this could be better next time in this way. I could do X, Y, Z. I could try taking a breath here. I could try doing this. I could try to be more open here. So I think there's a place for self-critique, especially if we're trying to grow as speakers and performers and artists, but to do it in a way that's actually for the higher good of the art that we're creating.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I really got out of Red. I would always record my sets and listen for the laughs and listen for the moments when people are still laughing and I would start talking again and kind of interrupt their laughter. The time, like even just like that comedic timing of like, let the room enjoy the thing.
Isn't there something, I don't know if this is true for you. So I think this is coming back to, yes, there is a God. I don't have this in a cohesive way, but I'm just going to vomit it out of what I'm feeling right now. There's something about being witnessed and allowing our essence to take up space that feels so divine. And when I really tune into that, I could cry. I was doing a warm-up this morning, which I've done with Red, where I was speaking my name to the corners of my room. And I was speaking intentions for this interview. I was just saying, soul, speak from heart, speak from gut, and just letting my essence take up the room. And it made me teary because I was like, there's something really beautiful about allowing that. For so long, I hadn't allowed that. I hadn't allowed my essence just to take up space. And if I am God's creation, if I am the divine's creation in this package, in this form, why wouldn't I let God's creation take up space and be seen and heard? It's kind of what you're saying about that pause when you got the laughs. Can you let yourself melt into this and enjoy that your essence and your energy reached people and tickled their souls in that way? I don't know. There's something really beautiful. And again, the word divine keeps coming up around that.
And also vulnerable, because like there's this, I think, especially for someone who might be into, self-help or spirituality, there's so much preoccupation with the ego, not wanting to be like self-indulgent or like a narcissist. But at the same time, when you're sharing art, when you're sharing something that you've literally made for the purpose of entertaining or bringing joy to other people, like let them be entertained, let them have the moments of joy, like the big crescendo moments,
Yes, my favorite part is the crescendo moment. And letting that energy fire up the room and give us all some electricity and wake us up. That's what it does. I feel like good art just gets into the body and wakes people up and stirs people up and wants them to be more alive and more expressed as well. I mean, I honestly think that's one of the biggest gifts we could give ourselves is to be fully expressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that there's times and circumstances and places and privileges and all kinds of things involved in whether or not people are able to be fully expressed. So it almost feels like slapping the face of your creator or whatever you believe in if you have the ability and access and things like that, and you're not. I'm putting a question mark on that. Is that true? I'm stating that more as an inquiry than I am as like a fact.
Yeah. I mean, I could just say that I think for many women, working with women in particular, the idea that this is too selfish comes up a lot because I think it's in our collective that women are taught to always think about others before themselves.
Yeah.
And so, will this offend somebody? Is it too selfish? Is it too egotistical? And I will just say that 99% of the time when I'm reading a woman's story who's asking that question, my gut instinct is, no, this is your truth and it's beautiful. Please go share it. It needs to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's also something that is so amazing to me, that even if you're just sharing in a room with like 20 people, even if it just hits one other person, that's one other person.
And you don't know how that one other person who's been changed or impacted will go impact or change someone else.
100, like
it's such a ripple effect. It's so beautiful.
And it's so like, it's immeasurable.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the ego part comes out, where it's like, it's like an offering. I don't need to know. I'll never know. I can't possibly know.
Totally. And I think at the time we're living in, where it's all about the big numbers and the fans and this and then that, to just know that we have touched or moved one individual or two individuals or a group of 50, if we can really let ourselves enjoy that, that is such a gift that we are giving to another human being that might need your words more than you have any idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we can never know. So one of my favorite parts about this whole conversation as we're winding down here is literally, I don't know that I've ever thought about it before, but how all types of art are so humanizing.
Yes. That, I mean, again, that for me is, especially when we're speaking of storytelling, and I believe storytelling can go into any type of art. I believe a comedian can be a storyteller, a song can tell a story, a poem can tell a story, right? So there's all these different ways that stories can be told through different genres. But the idea that this storytelling is this machine of empathy and communion and humanizing someone so that we can change our actions around things that we don't really know about. I mean, there's so much going on right now in the world politically, and there's so much sort of fighting, and just people are not really hearing and seeing one another. And I find that art is one of the best ways to just get in there and allow for a deeper conversation.
And I think also too, because when people are going to view or witness art, they're receptive, like they're open.
That's right.
They're actually available to be reached.
Yes.
In ways that they're not in other contexts.
Well, it's a ritual of sorts. When you speak of the container, when we go into a theater, it's a container of sorts. When we go into a movie theater, it's a container of sorts. So there's something, like you said, we already know that we're going into a place that has mysticism and magic and story around it. Yeah.
This was so great. I knew it would be. Thank you so much. For everyone listening, you can follow Christina on all the social medias, Christina Dunbar. Your website is christinadunbar.com. And whatever you're ever working on will be on your website or social media, right?
Yes.
And if people are in LA, Red is local. That's the other thing I loved about it, actually getting to gather with people in a room.
So good.
So good.
Me too.
So thank you so much. I loved this. I hope everyone listening, I hope you check out Christina. I hope you find me on Instagram, send me DMs or comment on the post. Let us know what you loved and share it up.
Yay. Thank you.
See both yourself and external reality at the same time as part of an interconnected web of reality is actually a daily practice. Because then you are seeing the entirety. If you don't see yourself, you're not seeing. And it's the same with others. When you look at somebody else, am I seeing myself and the other person at the same time?
Yeah.